Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of Rise Up, Ignite Your Life. And my name is Krista Fee of Battle to Be, and I am here bringing you an amazing guest tonight, Chaplain Todd Stewart. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here. I love bringing people on the show who have extensive experience in a whole bunch of different places. It makes the conversation so interesting. So I like to start our conversation in a really fun place. I like to go back to childhood. I like to know, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Well, that was easy. My dad and my grandfather were both law enforcement officers. And from a very early age, that was what I wanted to do. Wanted to be a cop like dad and grandpa. But that all changed when I saw my first episode of Emergency. And I saw Gage and DeSoto running and the fire engines, and that changed everything. And from that time forward, I knew I wanted to be a firefighter.
So multi-generationally, your family has been first responders. How did they react when you shifted gears and took a different path than the police department?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I had wanted to be a firefighter for quite a while, and when I was getting ready to graduate from high school, I had joined the fire department. I was a volunteer. I was still living at home, and I actually decided that I was going to go ahead and become a law enforcement officer like Dad. And it was really more of a thinking that was what Dad wanted me to do, follow in his footsteps. And so I told my dad that I was going to enroll in college and get my degree in administration of justice. And he put the squash on that pretty fast. He knew that I wanted to be a firefighter, and he knew why I was changing my mind. And he told me in no uncertain terms, "You do what you want to do." He said, "Stewards serve. That's what they do. And if you want to serve as a firefighter, there's absolutely nothing wrong. And I would be just as proud of you doing that as you would becoming a police officer." So I continued on my path to being a firefighter, and Dad was just fine with that.
Oh, family support is so important. So important. So you started very young.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And you have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress?
Yes, I was diagnosed.
Oh.
I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in 2020 after dealing with it for over 30 years.
So it's always really interesting having the conversation about traumatic stress and how it creeps up on you and that whole progression. And since it took 30 years for you to be diagnosed, what was that experience for you? Did you know what was happening early on? How did that come about?
Well, I knew I was suffering for all those years. I knew, I think later on, I knew what it was. But until I actually had somebody get me to a point where I could ask for help, it wasn't until then that I actually had the diagnosis. I started feeling the effects of the trauma that I'd experienced fairly early on in my firefighting career. And the way my career ended, that really accelerated the severity of it. But I spent that whole entire time not having told another human being about it until 2020.
So we'll get into your story a little bit in terms of what you experienced, and you can talk about it as much or as little as you feel comfortable. But the story that I hear so often, and the reason that I asked you that the way that I did, is because so many people go through 20 to 30 years of a career and nobody has told them that occupational traumatic stress is something that's likely to happen to them, and nobody has told them what to expect and what to look for and what the progress might look like if you were suffering from those trauma reactivities. So I always kind of ask that question in a way that we can get to, did you know what was happening to you, and did anyone explain what might happen and how that would progress? And just like you, it's usually a no, I had no idea. I knew that things weren't right. I knew that I was struggling. I knew that the job was getting to me, but I didn't know I had the reactivity to trauma. I didn't know that I had post-traumatic stress until way, way later. So, I mean, I think I've had, right now we're at 50 guests, and every one of my guests has had some form of occupational traumatic stress, and only one knew what was happening before it turned into something really life transformational and damaging in their career. So it's something that we want to look at, that there's room, there's space to address this way earlier than what we are. So go ahead and go into what was your job like? Why does that keep happening? What was your job like for you in the beginning?
Well, I absolutely loved being a firefighter. I was 17 years old, still living at home. And my station captain lived next door. So when that old Plectron radio went off, I would jump in my bunker gear and run across the front yard of my house and jump in his truck, and off we would go to Station 1 to respond. I just couldn't think of myself doing anything else with my life other than being a firefighter. But it didn't take long for the job to have an effect. I was a volunteer at Station 1 Federal Way Fire Department for the first 2 years of being a firefighter. And when I'd been on the department less than 2 months, we got called out to a suicide call. And we showed up at the scene, and I, again, 2-month rookie, I'd just been out of training, and I'm walking toward the house, and it turned out that this was a 15-year-old boy who had asphyxiated himself in their garage. And as I'm walking in the house, his mother comes out, and she had discovered him. And to this day, I can still so clearly see her face. And that look of pleading for me to save her son. And while my post-traumatic stress disorder has always manifested itself in my dead coming to visit me at night. She was, in a singular sense, the only one that visited me at night that was not somebody I couldn't save. She came to see me a lot in the middle of the night, and that was 2 months after I started. And when I got back to the station after that call, I was really shaken. And my station lieutenant seemed to have not affected him at all. And so I walked up to him and I said, "Man, that was effed up." And he looked at me and he said, "Just suck it up, rookie. Just don't let it get to you. The next call is already on its way. And if you start dwelling on this kind of stuff, you're not going to be ready for the next call. So just get it out of your mind and get ready for the next call." And that was the lesson that I learned about dealing with trauma on the job. Suck it up. You just push it down and get yourself ready for whatever the next call is going to be. And when I started to feel the effects of that, in my mind, this was something that I just needed to train myself to do. I looked around at the other firefighters on the job, especially the old timers that had been there a while, and they seemed to handle this just fine. So there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to do the same thing. And so after being in the department a couple of years, I started attending fire academy, and I was given a part-time job with the department, and I moved in and lived in another station. It was another all-volunteer station, but I was there with another firefighter. He was my station captain, and we were both there as part-time firefighters. And this was the busiest all-volunteer fire station in the state of Washington. We were running all the time, and I loved it. I pushed the struggles aside, and I was living, eating, breathing, sleeping, being a firefighter. And we were going on calls constantly. Federal Way, Washington is about midway between the city of Seattle and the city of Tacoma. It was a very built up area. That fire station should very well have been staffed by full-time firefighters, but it wasn't, and we ran all the time. And you started into the routine of being a career firefighter and seeing trauma all the time. During that period of time, there was starting to be more gang violence that was coming up from California into the Seattle area. So you were seeing a lot of people getting shot and a lot of gang violence. We had a lot of trauma that was occurring with young kids. We had a lot of problems with drunk driving accidents. One of the kids that took up residence in my nightmares for 3 decades. It was a 6-year-old girl, and her family was on Interstate 5 right in Federal Way, and a guy that was drunk came across the median and hit their car head on. And when we got there, the mother and father were already dead, but she was alive. alive in the back seat. And so we started working to extricate her from the car. But it was just really, really smashed up. We had to cut the roof off. And by the time we got to her, she was gone. She was dead. And that one in particular really, really hammered on me. We were Station 4. We were a gung-ho bunch. It was mostly volunteers, except for Steve and I. We were just an absolutely gung-ho bunch of guys. And we had the highest CPR save rate of any station in the district. And we had a standard that we set for ourselves that any patient that we came that was an advanced life support patient, that patient was going to be alive when we handed them off to the paramedics. Back then, we had 6 paramedic ambulances for the entire county. So you didn't get a paramedic automatically, and they weren't responding with you. So, well, that was a standard you could never live up to. And what I found was this, was that as many people as you save, as many lives as you save, those aren't the calls you remember.
No.
The calls that stay with you are the ones that you didn't save. And so I started, all of that started building up, and it was a lot of it was calls that involved kids, especially when it was a result of abuse. Those really, really hit hard. Or something like that accident where it was just somebody that, driving drunk, for crying out loud. And again, I'm looking around me and I don't see the other guys having the same kind of struggles that I did. And so obviously I wasn't going to say anything. I wanted this career so bad. And this was a family thing. I mean, from the time I was little, my grandfather, who was a cop for over 30 years, and my dad, they instilled that sense of service in me from a very young age. It was what Stewarts did. And so I felt like I had this family legacy that I had to uphold. And there was absolutely no way that I was going to fail at this.
And seeing everyone around you seemingly so strong and seemingly not affected by this stuff, how did that affect your beliefs about yourself?
Well, I started to think that there was something wrong, that I had a weakness somewhere that was allowing me to let these things get to me. And I had no idea what it was. But I certainly know that I wasn't going to bring it up with any of the other guys. There was no way. I had already learned how you dealt with this stuff. That you just suck it up. Just like that 2-month in rookie was told, you just suck it up and get ready for the next call. And at Station 4, the next call was just around the corner. You were running all the time.
Right. And the really scary thing is there is a need for you guys to be able to do that. So as we talk about teaching departments how to handle post-traumatic stress differently, we have to recognize that we can't change everything, that we can't soften everything, that we can't make everything about expressing your emotions, because you guys do in the work have to be ready, have to be sharp, have to be focused, have to be in that non-emotional place. But we also have to allow space and allow opportunity for those moments of, as everyone always says, for those moments of weakness, when it really is those moments of humanness, when those emotions need to be expressed and we need to be able to talk about it. Do you have any idea how can we implement that? How can we bring both of those worlds together where we maintain that focus and that intensity and that effectiveness, but still add in the ability to communicate better?
Well, I think we know how to do that. I think we know what the tools are. I think we've come such an incredibly long way since the time I was in the department in critical incident stress management, in debriefing strategies. The problem is that we're not in so many agencies, we're not training our rookie firefighters and police officers about these things, about what to expect, about and when those things happen, how to deal with them. There, in the training that I've been taking, there's so many stories about critical incident stress debriefings and the reactions that officers and firefighters have in those, and they're just incredibly dismissive of the need for them. They're not willing to talk. There's still the same stigma that was there in 1981 when I joined the department that's still out there. And even if it's in a strictly confidential setting where it's just officers in the department, these guys are still not willing to open up and talk about their experiences. And when you go out on a structure fire, in many ways, it's a failure of fire prevention. And that's how I feel about trauma and dealing with trauma. Right now, we're doing a lot of firefighting, and that's a failure of fire prevention in the sense of dealing with trauma. If we're talking to our rookies about this, if there is established curriculum within academies to teach brand new officers, brand new firefighters about this, about what to expect, about how to deal with it, about the fact that when you do experience a traumatic call, there is going to be a debriefing, and this is what is expected. If you can get that in and you can build those brand new officers and firefighters up in that way, you're going to start seeing less of the impact of this long-term buildup of trauma that has taken so many lives.
Absolutely. And I know there are already a few different programs out there, and we have a modular system of training that addresses that too, that any organization can have access, can have us come out and train their people so that they can keep it going over time. And it's super simple, super structured, easy to implement, and really exactly what you said. It's not that we don't have the tools and resources, it's that we have to get through the resistance and the stigma. So the challenge there is, and you even mentioned it earlier when you were talking about your experience, that as you were looking at those who served above you, those who were your leaders, and they were telling you, just suck it up. If we could begin with leadership and get leaders to demonstrate, to start being an example of being open about all of this change, do you think that that would make a difference?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think there are leaders out there that are doing that. But they're too few and too far between right now. I think as we start getting younger leadership in, and officers that are now line officers and sergeants and lieutenants that are aware of these issues and that have seen the result of some of the programs as they get higher up in leadership positions, I think we're going to see more and more of this being implemented in departments. But there's still such an incredibly long way to go. I mean, I'm hopeful, but I would really like to see it happening a lot faster than it is.
I second that. It's sometimes we get to see results in a small way, and we see us one department or one organization or even one person, one family that gets change and everything is transformed, and we get that hope in that window, and then see the statistics and realize that really from a big picture perspective it's just increasing and increasing everywhere. So, you know, none of our numbers are going down. Our military are not committing suicide less. Our firefighters not committing suicide less. Doctors, veterinarians, like literally all across the board, everyone's numbers are still increasing. Some slower than others, but that says that whatever we're doing, we're not doing it fast enough, and whatever we're doing, we don't have it yet, because those numbers tell the story that we'll know we got it right when those numbers start to decrease. And it will take time after we get it right. There's going to be a delayed reaction. So those numbers won't decrease for a while, but we can't just keep watching them go up.
No,
So,
we can't.
Go ahead.
And I just say, and that's what drives me. That's what I feel that God has called me to do, because I came so close to simply being a number that I feel like the good Lord stayed my hand that night for a very good reason. And that's what I'm doing right now.
A Battle to Be, we talk a lot about tools and resources, and we shy away from faith-based because there's a lot of organizations that already have that covered. But for you, faith was a big part of it. Do you want to talk about that journey to faith and where you're going with that now?
Absolutely. So I've been a person of faith since I was about 17 years old. But when my career ended and I was injured in a house fire, going up a flight of stairs in a house fire, and the stairway collapsed. It was definitely what you would consider a near-death experience. I thought for sure I was going to die, and my brothers came out on that stairway and they saved my life, but it ended my career. And I wouldn't find out until many years later just what kind of impact that had on my mental health. It was devastating. I talked earlier about that family legacy, and I felt like I had failed. I had failed to live up to that legacy. Hundreds of lives saved, 6 years of serving my community, but I felt that I was a failure. And so I ended up in an extremely dark place. And I came to the conclusion that God had forgotten me. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in God any longer, but I felt like he had turned his back on me. And I ended up in a place that I honestly can't put into words. the nightmares were incredibly just, they were so bad. I have a real hard time describing them to people outside the first responder community, because I just don't want to inflict that on people. Um, I, I was terrified of going to sleep, and that led to me using methamphetamine and smoking a lot of marijuana, just trying to avoid sleeping. And then when I had no choice, to be just so out of it that the hope was that those nightmares wouldn't come. And in 2003, after I had lost my marriage, I was separated from my children. I really had decided that God had really forgotten all about me, and it was a night in November of 2003. I spent that night with a gun in my mouth, and I tell people that a Colt 45 has about a 4.5 pound trigger pull, and I honestly don't know how much of that 4.5 pounds I'd taken up, but God, I can only describe it as a vision. I saw my 4 beautiful daughters, and I didn't do it. And so I decided at that minute that I wasn't going to kill myself, that my daughters, not that they needed their broken, effed up dad, but that if I killed myself, they wouldn't have any financial support. And so I decided to wait until they were grown, and then I would take care of it. I delayed my suicide so that my daughters would have income. Now, at that particular time, I was so messed up, I wasn't working. I was living in a van. But that night was the last night that I ever did methamphetamine. And within 2 days, I had gone into information technology. I was a computer programmer after I left the fire department. And so within a couple of days, I found a job in Missouri. And I was still so completely messed up. I was still having a lot of nightmares. I was still smoking absolutely tons of weed to try and hold that at bay. But I was making a living. I was sending money to my daughters. And so that went on until, well, I was in Missouri for a couple of years. I ended up in Nebraska, working for Cabela's, and I worked there, and it was still just the same thing, just kind of dragging myself along, and waiting for that time when I could finally get it all over with. And so in 2012, my wife started to really struggle with alcohol addiction. It was my second wife. I met her in Nebraska, and that started to really work on me even more. And so that was another added stressor. And so that went on for quite some time. In 2018, I moved to where I am now in Iowa, and in 2020, after everything happened with the in Ferguson, and my family police officers were getting killed. They were getting murdered. And that really started to work on me. And the pandemic and that suicidal ideation started to creep back in. And I realized that my daughters are grown. There's nothing that's going to keep me from doing it this time. And a buddy of mine that I met when I was here, he's a former corrections officer. One day he said, "Todd, what the hell's going on, man? There's something wrong." And that buddy check saved my life, because he didn't believe the answer I gave him. "I'm okay. Everything's fine." He said, "Bullshit. What's going on?" And for the first time in over 30 years, I told another human being about everything that had happened and about what I'd been going through. And it was then that I realized that, well, maybe God hadn't forgotten about me after all. So I work for an agricultural co-op here in Iowa, and I contacted their EAP. Now, you know how much of a crapshoot that is. And you know how much the first responder community really doesn't trust anybody outside of the first responder community. Well, this was another sign that maybe God was working in my life, because that random choice therapist, I walked into his office and he said, "Hi, my name's Peter. I'm a minister, and I'm also a retired West Des Moines police officer." And so that started my journey. And I went to a psychologist. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and hypervigilance, and I started seeing another incredible therapist who started me with EMDR. And after I started that, and I actually started to see some light in my life, I realized that God had definitely not forgotten me, that he was equipping me, and that I had a calling, and that he had stayed my hand that night because he knew eventually I would be ready to do what I'm doing today. And so it was an amazing revelation to know that God had been there all along, and that he put me through a hell of a boot camp, but that he had a purpose for me, and that the affliction was as much of his plan from where I'm at today as was the saving grace that he put upon me in 2020 and saved my life.
There's a necessity to understand suffering from the inside if you're going to actually be able to help people with suffering from the outside. So I think any therapist who hasn't experienced trauma or who hasn't had their own extraordinary life challenges is limited in their ability to reach certain people and to connect with people on that hardcore, deep level of understanding that is sometimes so necessary, because words don't do it. You can't just talk through all of it. There's a co-regulation, there's a sensory aspect of it, there's a we're connected and we're going through this together element that is crucial. And you are working now as a chaplain, so you are actually reaching out and connecting with others and bringing your story forward so that other people don't struggle the way that you did. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So So after I had been taking EMDR therapy for about 9 months, I had connected on LinkedIn with an amazing guy. His name is Matthew Miller, and he's a chaplain with the New York State Chaplains Task Force. And it was during one of those conversations that he and I were having that he said, you really need to use what you've been through and turn around and help our brothers and sisters out. And it was there that I just felt this call from God saying, you listen to this guy. And so I went through the training and got my certification as a community crisis chaplain, which is it's not specific to first responders. It's for serving anybody in the community that's in crisis. So that was only in April that I got my certification. I turned around and immediately started looking for additional training in peer support and first responder related spiritual care. And I found an amazing guy who I've been trying to get onto LinkedIn. His name is Barry Young. He's the chaplain of the Independence, Missouri Police Department. And he has an organization called Serving Heroes. And he travels the country apparently all year long and provides affordable training for chaplains and peer support teams. And so I've taken several of his trainings, and I have already been blessed by God to be put in the lives of several first responders who are in need of care. And right now I am working toward becoming a chaplain for my local police and fire department here in Waukee. And I'm also speaking tonight, as soon as I'm off here, I'm speaking with the chaplain for the First Responders Bridge, which is Mick Yinger's organization that does weekend-long retreats for first responders and their spouses. I attended last year as an attendee, and I'm hoping that I will attend this year as a chaplain. So God is placing me in the lives of people who need me to be God's instrument in their life. I have to relate an absolutely incredible story. Aaron Terrell, he's a medically retired Lansing, Michigan police officer. He's also a peer advocate for the Wounded Blue. And he suffered a terrible traumatic brain injury in 2014 in an accident in his patrol car. And he suffers with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is the disease you hear so often about in football players. And I've been ministering to him for a while. And several weeks ago, he told me that he had never been baptized. And this was a blessing that you can't even imagine to me. And so he asked me, he said, would you baptize me? And I had a hard time holding my shit together. I really did. It was just what a gift that God had given me. Excuse me. And so a couple of weeks ago, I drove from Iowa to his little town of Owasso, Michigan. And in 48-degree weather with a nice breeze blowing, I baptized him in a small lake in the middle of his hometown. And since I've been a chaplain, that has been the biggest blessing that I've ever received from God, was to do that for somebody. But being a chaplain isn't necessarily about Christian ministry. The core ethics of a chaplain is that you're there to serve somebody in crisis. And whether or not that police officer or that firefighter or that citizen is a Christian, or whether they're a Muslim or a Hindu, or they're a non-religious person, that does not matter at all. At the core of the chaplaincy, it's what's known as a ministry of presence. It's being there to emotionally support somebody who's in crisis. And I can't tell you what an incredible blessing God has given me in calling me to this service. I'm just happy and blessed to be doing what I'm doing today.
Thank you so much. And what last words would you give to our audience, to our folks out here?
Well, I think in terms of helping our first responder family, I think right now, while we're still struggling with getting the culture in our agencies changed, I think that while we're still in firefighting mode, and we're going to be there for a while, we still have more suicides than line of duty deaths every year. And so there's still frontline work to be done. And I think the key to that is peer support. If I were to emphasize the most important thing in terms of helping law enforcement, firefighters, dispatchers with trauma, it's peer support. Because again, there's that trust factor. There's that common experience. And while I'm not a clinician, I, as a fellow first responder, can hopefully get another first responder to open up about what they're dealing with and be that first step toward getting them to the kind of help they need. Because for me, that was why I never opened up to another human being about what I was going through for over 3 decades. I didn't trust anybody outside of that circle. Excuse me. And I was no longer in that circle either, because I was retired and now I was in another profession. I felt like I felt excluded from that. And so I had nobody to turn to. But those that are still active in service, peer support, I think, is absolutely key. It's that key first step to get somebody who's struggling into a place that they know somebody cares. They know somebody has gone through the same thing that they have gone through and have come out the other side. That there actually is an end, a possible end to what they're going through. That is so key. So I feel like first responder peer support has got to be the first thing that we grow, because I think it's the easiest thing to do in terms of what agencies can do. Changing your entire culture that's a big deal. And a lot of times it takes a change in leadership to do it. But building peer support teams, and even if it's not an official part of the organization, and sometimes it almost has to be, because those officers and firefighters, they're not going to talk to somebody else within their department because they feel like, man, if that gets back upstairs. So I think peer support, either within or adjacent to our agencies, is right now the best first thing we can do to get firefighters and police officers and dispatchers connected to the help they need.
They need their good first step, and we as providers also need to be thinking about, just like you said, we need to be thinking about that first step. What can we implement? What can we get into place quickly and efficiently? And I absolutely agree with you. That is where we need to go. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and keep us informed of where your training goes and what you get involved in. And I'm going to let you go for the evening. But again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me tell my story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And if you want to reach out to Chaplain Todd, he is on LinkedIn. And I want to say a really quick thank you to our brand new corporate sponsor, AP Laser, for providing us with a 2616 lowrider that's going to allow us to do the plaques that we do for our families of fallen heroes. And that's going to be really impactful for our Ferryman project. And I will see you guys all again tomorrow. Don't forget, if you want to support the podcast, you can click the button below that says support the podcast, or you can go to battle2be.org, battle2be.org, and make a donation to our program. It is right on the front page, easy to do. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow.